The college basketball season tipping off today. St. John's hosting Quinnipiac, 6:30 Eastern. The Red Storm, #1 in Gary Parrish's preseason top 25 and 1 following their breakout season under Rick Pitino. Earned a 2 seed in the big dance, but got knocked out in the second round. St. John's 7th shortest odds to win the title. They are 20-1. The co-favorites to win it all at plus 950. Purdue and a Houston team you can see on CBS Sports Network tonight at 8 o'clock Eastern time against Lehigh. Defending champion Florida is 14-1. All right, let's get Gary Parrish in here, who's tweaked his top 25 and 1, seems like every other day for the last 3 months or so. And Gary, you still have St. John's #1, and you're higher than most. You see different rankings. You saw the odds. They're 7th. You saw the rankings. They're anywhere from 4, 5, 6. You have them 1, but you still have some questions about them early in the season. What are they?
I obviously do, Chris. The truth is I locked St. John's in at #1 in the top 25 and 1 very early in the offseason when it became clear they were returning Zuby Ejiofor, who is the preseason Big East Player of the Year up front, and then adding a transfer portal class that, at least in my eyes and many others, was the most talented transfer portal class in the country, headlined, of course, by former McDonald's All-American 5-star prospect Ian Jackson, who transferred to St. John's from North Carolina. At the time, Rick Pitino described Ian Jackson as St. John's next great point guard. So I was fired up, looking really good with the Red Storm at #1. Subsequently, after some practices and scrimmages, Rick has moved off that a little bit and is now saying Isaiah Sellers, a transfer from Stanford, will be the starting point guard, and Dylan Darling, another transfer, will back him up. So the guy who was once called St. John's next great point guard doesn't appear likely to even play point guard at St. John's at all. That's obviously unusual and at least somewhat concerning. It suggests that the roster has not come together the way Rick Pitino imagined. Either way, I still think the talent in Queens is overwhelming. They have quite literally one of the greatest basketball minds and coaches ever in charge of it. I'm going to trust Rick Pitino to figure it out. I promise you, I've trusted worst and least talented people before.
And they got to get going early because they have a game later this week, Madison Square Garden against Alabama, #15 in the AP poll. Most teams starting off with glorified exhibitions, right? But BYU and some other teams out in Vegas have interesting games. BYU in your top 5, they take on Villanova. What do you expect to see early from the 5-star freshman A.J. Dybantsa?
Shots and points, because he is one of the best natural scorers to enter college in a long, long time. Hassel, I saw him a few summers ago for the first time at Peach Jam down in North Augusta, South Carolina. This was the summer after his freshman year of high school. He's playing against other high school prospects, the best in the country, and he led the entire event in scoring again after his freshman year of high school. So he's uniquely gifted, in play to possibly be the #1 overall pick in the 2026 NBA draft. Most people don't think there's any scenario where he could go outside of the top 3. He's just a uniquely gifted long wing who can impact the game on both ends of the court. And it's awesome that we're going to be able to see him for the first time in a regular season game in a BYU uniform against a prominent program and another high major team. BYU Villanova, one of the best games on the schedule on this opening day.
Maybe the best game is a game involving the defending champions at that Hall of Fame series in Vegas. Florida facing Arizona, but the Gators, despite being the defending champs, despite being 3rd in the AP poll, not in your top 10. Why is that?
I have them actually in that range. The truth is they lost their best player and basically their entire backcourt. Now, I do like what Ty Golden did to supplement the roster. You bring back incredible pieces in the front court, arguably the best front court in the country, but the backcourt needed to be replaced. Obviously, in a different era of the sport, they would have to go into the high school ranks and probably just get best high school players available to come in and fill those roles. But in this era of the sport, with NIL, revenue sharing, and the transfer portal and transfer waivers, you could actually go add big-time experienced players, and that's exactly what they did. Boogie Flynn from Arkansas, Xavier Lee from Princeton. Florida is not going to be my pick to repeat as national champions. As you know, I do not have the Gators in the Final Four. But understand, this much is very clear to me. They're good enough to do it on paper. I won't predict it, but I will not be surprised if we look up in the Final Four, April 2026, and Todd Golden and his basketball program are right there, just 2 more wins away from a national title. On paper, they look like they're talented enough to at least compete and be a part of those conversations.
Yeah, you have them at 6. I misspoke. I said not in the top 10, meant not in the top 5. You haven't changed any of these teams. You're just kind of been moving these teams around the board. The 26 teams have been the same all offseason. But you did have a big move here before the season tipped off, and it was Illinois, up 8 spots to number 16. Why?
The truth is, sometimes, Hassel, I start doing this literally the day after the national championship game, and I am updating in real time off of roster developments, but with no guidance from computers or anything else. And like I mentioned with St. John, sometimes you do get locked into things, but I decided on the eve of the season to take a fresh look at the top 25 and 1 and just adjust in a few different places where I felt like maybe I'd gotten a little out of whack. So I moved Kansas up a little bit. I moved Purdue up to number 2. I took Auburn down a few spots in the absence of Bruce Pearl, but yes, I made Illinois my biggest mover heading into this season. You asked the question why? It's simple. I think I undervalued them in the offseason. Brad Underwood, he's returning 3 starters from a team that got a 6th seed in the NCAA tournament, and then he supplemented that roster with European players, specifically Eastern European players. Illinois now has 5 Eastern Europeans on their roster, and I talked to Brad Underwood about this recruiting approach philosophy last month in Chicago at Big Ten Media Day, and he said it is very intentional, deliberate, and he simply believes that in this moment in time, European basketball players at this age are better equipped to help you immediately in the Big Ten than American high school basketball players would be. He says they're better skilled, broadly speaking, more coachable, broadly speaking, and ready to help and just a better bang for your buck. I use that phrase intentionally because we are in an era where we're buying players from all over the world. And so I think I had just undervalued Illinois earlier in this offseason, and I wanted to get them a little higher in the rankings because I do believe Brad Underwood obviously doesn't have the favorite in the Big Ten. That's Purdue, but he's got a team that should be able to compete near the top of the Big Ten with the Boilermakers.
They're hosting Jackson State tonight to tip off their season. The biggest riser this week in your poll. The biggest faller, it makes sense. It's Auburn, down 4 spots after Bruce Pearl decided to become a co-worker of ours at CBS and even some other networks. What does his son have at his disposal opening tonight against Bethune-Cookman?
Well, Bruce left him a quality basketball team, evidence that it is ranked in the preseason top 25. It's headlined by a small second-year guard named Tahad Pettiford, who came off of Auburn's bench mostly last season, but could go from reserve role player, 6-man type of guy to candidate for SEC Player of the Year. I know that some, particularly Stephen Pearl, might interpret what I did here as a slight toward him. I would actually flip it around and make the opposite true. It's nonsensical to me to think that you could, at Auburn, lose a Hall of Fame caliber coach like Bruce Pearl and it not matter at all. Stephen might be great and create a career that takes him to incredible places, Final Fours, and perhaps the Hall of Fame someday too. But at this point, we don't know, and so we have to see it, and I think it's reasonable to assume that a basketball team, you ready for this? Basically any basketball team in the world is not as good without Bruce Pearl as it would be with Bruce Pearl. But the early returns have been impressive. Auburn played Memphis in an exhibition in Atlanta last week and ran the Tigers completely off the court. So Stephen Pearl at least has got a big exhibition win under his belt, and we'll see how this first season unfolds.
All right, just a taste of the top 25 and 1, which Gary's going to be updating each and every day during the college basketball season. And you can hear him just about every day on the Eye on College Basketball podcast. Next episode, Wednesday morning, 9:45 a.m. Eastern Time with Gary and Matt Norlander to recap the first 2 days of the college basketball season.